Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We're glad you're here, and we just want to let you know that in addition to good, bad, and crazy martinis today, we have a bunch of special episodes lined up for you in the next couple of weeks. Come back on Monday and all next week, we've got our year-end Three Martini Lunch Awards season. On Monday, we will start with our underrated, overrated, and most honest political figures. Pay no attention to my underrated figure. Things have changed since we recorded that one. Then we'll talk about people we're sorry to see pass away in 2024, rising stars, people fading into political oblivion, best ideas, worst ideas, best political theater, worst political theater, boldest tactics, all kinds of biggest lie. The media will focus on eventually person of the year, loser of the year, turncoat of the year, and then finally on New Year's Day, our predictions for 2025. So a lot of fun looking back, seeing where we were right, seeing where we were surprised, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But today, back to our usual fare, good, bad, and crazy. And Jim, we're actually going back about 20 years for the context for this first one. But it looks like the Supreme Court will at least have the opportunity to correct one of its biggest mistakes during our adult lifetimes, I would say. And that is the Kelo versus New London case from 2005, in which the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the government could take away your private property and give it to another private entity. That was not a popular decision. It was 5-4. Thankfully, everyone who was in the majority is no longer on the Supreme Court. John Paul Stevens with the majority, Anthony Kennedy with the concurring opinion there, Justice O'Connor in one of her most scathing and probably dissents of hers that I would cheer the most on that particular case. But now there's another case that has been brought to the U.S. Supreme Court. Jonathan Turley, the George Washington University professor, writing about this. It's called Bowers versus Oneida County Industrial Development Agency. And at issue is the very same issue that was in Kelo, because if I whip out my handy dandy Constitution here, the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, along with all the protections you've got if you're on trial and don't have to testify against yourself and all that stuff. It says, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Nothing in there about having it taken away and giving away to a private entity. So, Jim, don't know if the court will take this case. You never know exactly how it's going to unfold or what the specifics are in this particular case. But if we can get Kelo reversed, that would be awesome.
It would. And I feel like every time a big decision comes down from the Supreme Court, and those rare occasions when the Supreme Court says, yeah, we know there's precedent in this. We think that precedent was wrongly decided. We, the Supreme Court majority, who are the one people who have authority to do this, not you folks in the lower courts. You don't get to suddenly one hand decide, oh, you know what? I think everybody else has been wrong on this and I'm right. Only the Supreme Court can look at society, look at the law and say, you know what? Our predecessors botched this. They have read this wrongly. That's what happened in Roe v. Wade. And if you want to say, like we as conservatives generally respect precedent. The law yesterday was a certain way. The law should be the same today. We need it to be stable. We need it to be predictable. But every once in a while, like when the Supreme Court says, yes, segregation's hunky dory. The subsequent Supreme Court needs to step in and say, no, that was wrong. They should not have done it that way. If the Supreme Court says, hey, it's perfectly fine to put Japanese Americans in internment camps, it's nice to come along later and say, hey, you know what? They should not have done that. That absolutely violates the concept of equal protection under the law set forth in the Constitution. That was wrong. Kelo versus New London, I think, really stands out for being so botched in a Supreme Court. Like, this is before the quote-unquote Trump court. But I don't remember that court era of being one in which we were regularly getting one bad decision after another. And on this one, it just seemed so blatant, so direct. Look, we have a very well-established process of eminent domain, and very few people object. Look, the government's got to build roads. So sometimes, they need the path of the road has to go through your property. They got to, compensate you for it. Power lines, sewer lines, natural gas, but there's all kinds of circumstances. Like, look, we have stuff that needs to get from here to there. Your property's in the middle. This is the best possible path. We're going to take your property, but we're going to compensate you fairly for it. That's the way it's worked for a very long time. In New London, it was, well, you've had this property a long time. We just think this other company would pay more in taxes. So we want to take it from you and give it to them, and we'll collect that. Oh, by the way, they never actually built the stuff, so it's still an empty lot. So they knocked down the existing, the private property owners, just enormously botched. And I remember there was like one or two of my colleagues at National Review who thought it was correctly decided or could point to in precedent. And man, oh man, did we go hammer and tong over this. I was over in Turkey at the time, and I remember just, I was on the other side of the world, like, what are you guys doing since in my absence? I leave you guys for 6 months, and, suddenly private property rights don't exist. So hopefully this will come. This is kind of a sneak preview, a trailer of a better Martini to come down the road. Probably not for a year or two, but it would be very good if the Supreme Court took another crack at this one and corrected that previous decision and said, at minimum, there's got to be a much higher standard for anything where you want to take somebody's land in the name of economic development and giving it to somebody else because you think they're going to pay more in taxes.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, the purpose of the government is to protect life, liberty, and property, and it definitely did not in the Kelo decision. In addition to O'Connor, she was joined in the dissent on the 5-4 ruling by Rehnquist, Scalia, and of course Clarence Thomas. Man, I miss Rehnquist and Scalia. They were awesome. All right, Z-Biotics. I said yesterday I was going to the Radio America staff Christmas party. Jim, I actually ordered a beer.
Wow.
Shouldn't have. Got through about a quarter of it. Not a beer guy. But so I didn't need Z-Biotics, but I also wasn't the last one there. So it's possible that other of my colleagues might have. But as I've said before, I've got a colleague who knew his limits well. They stopped working as he aged, and then he tried Z-Biotics, and he was right back to where he was. Felt great the next morning. So bottom line, if you're going to drink, take Z-Biotics first. You'll feel better the next morning.
Greg, when I tell people about Z-Biotics, I'm often telling them to drink responsibly. Well, I'm just going to say doubly. Drink responsibly at your company Christmas party. I'm sorry, it's very often a holiday Christmas party at many companies. National Review, we call it all holidays, Christmas and everything else. And I actually didn't attend this year. I was feeling under the weather. But yeah, it's still an office event. HR is watching. Do not get hammered. But Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. So just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, especially at company events, and you'll feel your best the following morning.
Go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. And come to think of it, Jim, the first guy that came up to John McClane when he got to Nakatomi up on the 30th floor was a little bit inebriated, as you'll recall.
Yes.
Not as bad as doing a line of coke in your office, which was also happening.
Alice, what are you doing? That stuff's going to get you killed someday.
Oh, man. All right, well, let's talk about our bad martini now. And for that, we have to head over to the Pentagon. Major General Patrick Ryder, U.S. Air Force, is the Pentagon press secretary, and he had to come out with some awkward news for us yesterday. Turns out the number of troops they've been giving us for being stationed in Syria has changed considerably.
As you know, we have been briefing you regularly that there are approximately 900 U.S. troops deployed to Syria. In light of the situation in Syria and the significant interest, we recently learned that those numbers were higher. And so asked to look into it. I learned today that, in fact, there are approximately 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria. As I understand it, as it was explained to me, these additional forces are considered temporary rotational forces that deploy to meet shifting mission requirements, whereas the core 900 deployers are on longer-term deployments.
Jim, I really hope the phrase "we recently learned" refers to the press office and not people much higher up the chain of command, because otherwise who's making these decisions? You always worry about mission creep here. I know there's a lot of instability in Syria and they don't want it to spill across borders. But when you more than double it and you're slow on reporting that, it doesn't build trust. And this administration's got lots of problems with trust already. But we also don't want to get ourselves intertwined with anything much, much deeper than we already are.
You think about it, and this goes back to I don't know if you call it the height of the Syrian civil war, but it goes back before the Biden administration and the Trump administration. This is one of the quietest U.S. military deployments in a country at war with all kinds of bad guys all fighting through each other. The Assad regime, I was not going to say God rest, God darn, the now departed Assad regime. The Russians had a military presence there, a significant number of Wagner mercenaries there. And of course, seemingly every variety of Islamist under the sun. Some of them who say, trust us, we're reformed, we're hunky-dory, nothing to worry about. And so it's not surprising we'd have a U.S. military presence. The one explanation where I'd be, okay, well, this makes sense, is if they said, look, we have 900 who are there, and we have 1,100 who were there, as they mentioned, this temporary rotation, and you, the media, and the public were not supposed to know about that because the mission was classified, because there was a reason for keeping that secret. We're telling you now because the reason to keep that secret has passed. I don't know if they're out of harm's way. It's very hard to believe any place in Syria is that far out of harm's way. And I know there are a lot of people who might say, bring them out of there. It's not our fight. And not a lot of good dogs to root for in this fight. That having been said, they're there for a reason. And my suspicion is, Syria had a chemical weapons program that they used against their own people quite a bit. Syria has biological weapons. Syria has all kinds of arsenals, and has also a whole bunch of guys from ISIS who are ended up in prison. And I think one of the great concerns in the last few weeks has been if the new regime releases all of these guys. So there might be very good reason to have a U.S. military presence in that neck of the woods. That having been said, with seeing the entire regime collapse and a new Islamist types in charge, very good reason to be concerned. And I suppose you get a little bit of credit to the Pentagon for coming out and correcting the record, but it's really not reassuring that, for the last week, 2 weeks, the Pentagon has been telling us this is the situation, and they come out, oopsie, we forgot we had 1,100 guys there we forgot to mention.
So that's basically how it happens, right? It's somebody got wind of it, and so then they had to come out and act like they were breaking the news?
Yeah, that probably makes sense. But like they said, it was in response to inquiries. So my guess is somebody out there was working on Pentagon has 2,000 troops in Syria, not 900 as they've been saying. But that's the right thing to do in journalism is, hey, we've got this information that does not line up with what you've said. Are you sure? As Joe Pesci asked in My Cousin Vinny, and it gives Ryder and the other folks at the Pentagon to say, actually, Emily Matella, never mind. It turns out we have 2,000. Whoopsie, we miscounted. Somebody moved when we took the picture, and and hopefully these guys stay safe for the remainder of the year and well after that.
Well, I guess that's more honesty than we get from the White House podium, sometimes the State Department podium. I mean, at the White House, it's just pure fiction from dusk till dawn or dawn till dusk, depending on how Mayorkas wants to phrase it that day. But let's pray they stay safe and that things don't unravel there even further than they already have. Omaha Steaks. We are now less than a week from Christmas, and we've been talking about the greatness of Omaha Steaks for a long time now. Love the steaks. Love the burgers, love the chicken, love the seafood, love the sides. They even have wine, desserts. And I was just talking to Mrs. Columbus this morning, and we've talked about the taste and the flavor and how easy the prep is. And I said, is there anything else that you would want to pass on about how great Omaha Steaks are? And she's like, yeah, they always send really great cuts of meat. And so that's what you're going to get. The highest quality from Omaha Steaks, whether it's for yourself, a loved one, a friend, what have you. Right now, save 50% site-wide at omahasteaks.com during the Christmas gift buying season, plus get an extra $30 off with the promo code 3ML. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code 3ML. Again, omahasteaks.com, 50% off and $30 off with our promo code 3ML. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And this was not the crazy martini I was hoping to go out for our last normal episode of the year before we get to our year-end specials next week. But hey, the news cycle gives us what the news cycle gives us. And so we go to the Associated Press, and well, he's back. Former U.S. Congressman Anthony Weiner has filed to run for a seat on the New York City Council, launching a potential political comeback after his once promising career was destroyed by sexting scandals and later a criminal conviction for having illicit online contact with a child. Campaign finance records list a campaign committee that was set up on Friday for Weiner, which is called Weiner 25, in addition to listing him as a candidate for a council seat in Lower Manhattan. In a phone conversation Tuesday with the AP, Weiner, a Democrat, said, quote, he is still exploring, unquote, whether to actually campaign for the office. He also said, quote, "I haven't decided if I want to do this yet while considering the personal dynamics of a return to politics." Weiner represented a congressional district in New York City for about 12 years before resigning in 2011 after sending lewd photos to several women. He tried to make a comeback in 2013 to run for mayor, but was damaged by new revelations of explicit photos sent under the alias Carlos Danger. Remember that one? Weiner pleaded guilty in 2017 to having illicit online contact with a 15-year-old girl and was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison, released in 2019. He's a registered sex offender now. So, Jim, all of a sudden, Andrew Cuomo, if he gets in the mayor's race, is going to be like, "This, hey, I'm not the worst guy on the ballot."
Greg, I was just going to make that joke, darn it. You beat me to it.
Sorry.
Andrew Cuomo saying, who's the biggest slime ball now, right? You know, your impression of Cuomo is better. I will point out, though, when you said that the registered Weiner 25, I just want to ask, how did the Oscar Mayer people miss out on that? They should have registered that trademark, spared us a lot of trouble. Dear people of New York, stop them. Don't let them do that. Like, why? Like, they really think you're cheap dates. And cheap dates are really what Carlos Danger is best known for. This idea that, like, I can come back and say I'm a changed man, and until you catch me doing the exact same thing a third time, I'm good enough to be on your city council. You don't, a city of 8 million people, you can't find anybody better than me. Now, unlike a whole bunch of other folks, I actually have a personal interaction with Anthony Weiner.
That's right.
You don't have to turn down the radio for this. This is not a matter of him inappropriately coming on to me or anything like that. So I was on the Bill Maher program once. This was back when Bill Maher was much more of a snide liberal comic, right? I guess I'm probably never getting invited back. But they did invite me back a couple times afterwards. Schedule didn't work, and I can't say I loved it. My brother had the very sharp observation that in the Bill Maher of those days, and again, he's been through a political and personal transformation since then. He's a lot more fun for conservatives to watch these days, and God bless him. But at that point, if you were the conservative guest on the Bill Maher program, if you said something serious, he would make a joke, and he would, kind of jab you that way. If you made a joke, he would then take you serious, and it was kind of this jujitsu for any of the token conservatives on the program. Greg, I'm going to read you the lineup of guests. Maybe you remember way back when. This was back when it was promoting the weed agency, and it was like, got to do every TV appearance I can. The main guest was filmmaker John Waters. Bit of an odd character, shall we say. Nicest guy in the world. He had been on the previous time with Andrew Breitbart, and he talked about what a great time he and Breitbart had. So John Waters, terrific person. The other primary token conservative on this one was Ralph Reed, who I'd known from several National Review events. After the show, he comes out. We're kind of, the audience had loved the liberal guests, not really loved me or Reed or myself. And Reed says, some days you're the Christians, some days you're the Lions. Tonight we were the Christians, which was kind of the way it felt there. Nicole Wallace, back when she was technically still sort of kind of a conservative, not anymore. Myself and Anthony Weiner. And we're right about to tape there. And they had to go through makeup and all that kind of stuff. But they go through the introduction for me, author of the Weed Agency, writer for National Review. And at that point, I was doing more freelancing. And they said a contributing writer to this paper, that paper, and the New York Post. And he kind of looks at me. And we're speaking quietly. They're about to begin taping. He says, "You write for the New York Post?" I'm like, "Yeah, I wrote for a couple pieces for the op-ed page." He goes, "Oh, okay. So you don't really write for them." Now, cleaning up my language for Greg's sake, screw you, Anthony Weiner. You have no authority to look down on it. First of all, op-ed contributors, is my name in the paper? Then yes, I write for the New York Post, right? At least back then. Washington Post is like, we don't want you writing anyplace else anymore. So I'm like, fine, that's Jeff Bezos' money is able to assure that for me. But it was one of those things like, what a jerky thing to do. And here he is. This is, I believe, in between.
Yes.
Actually, no, 2013. This was the second time, right? Because you said the 2013 was the mayoral bid that went down. So he's been caught twice sending his schlong to underage girls, and he's got the standing to look down on me? Really? Okay, so come on, New Yorkers. You need a good scrubbing. You remember when they cleaned the subway cars for the first time in like years over COVID? That's what you need to do your politics. Don't let Andrew Cuomo come back, and don't let Anthony Weiner come back.
Wonder if Cuomo will
Where's
actually
client
do it.
number 9? He's probably looking at this and saying, well, if everybody else is coming back, I should too.
Elliot Spitzer, please don't suggest that. That's the last thing we need is all these people reemerging, all sleazy. But you did mention Andrew Breitbart in passing there, which is one of the great moments in political theater ever, when Weiner was going to have a press conference in New York and was late, and Breitbart just happened to be in the area, so he not only went, but he took over the stage, was explaining how he basically caught Anthony Weiner,
Breitbart, and the team at Breitbart had caught, Weiner was doing like sexting and sending DMs to people that's sexual when you're a married man. That's bad. Doing it to somebody who's underage puts it on a whole different category of no, you should not be doing this. And the line from Weiner was that his account had been hacked, and that's why it looked like there was this incriminating evidence. And he put out this tweet saying, "At least I'm having all kinds of technical problems. My account got hacked. At least the toaster is still loyal." Now, that was this really infamous line. Later that week, they found out that Anthony Weiner had been seeing another toaster behind his toaster's back. So the toaster was still loyal, but he was not loyal to the toaster. Just what an absolute slime ball. But anyway, yes, Andrew Breitbart, you are missed, and that was one of his greatest moments.
No doubt about it. So that'll wrap it up for us this week. It'll also wrap it up for us in our normal format for the year. But again, please check out our year-end specials starting on Monday, going all through next week, and then all the way through New Year's Day. It's going to be a lot of fun looking back at some of the best and worst moments of this incredible year of 2024. And then our predictions on New Year's Day, January 1st, and then January 2nd. Jim and I will be right back here talking about the day's latest news. So to you, our valued listener, and of course to you, Jim, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. But officially, I'll see you on Monday.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, all great greetings. Is there anything else in there? Kwanzaa for all the public school teachers out there? Every last one of you. Have a great holiday season.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Columbus, Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great weekend and join us again on Monday for our first year-end special of the 3 Martini Lunch Awards for 2024. Have a great weekend.